Hi everybody, my name is Ben Classen. I'm the agency director of Skeleton Key Agency. We are based in Laguna Beach, California and Bend, Oregon. We've been in business for about 4 years now. Our work has been primarily focused in the outdoor space, building brands and into growing new areas for the brands and preparing them for acquisition, growth, or whatever the next step in their business is. Um, we have a small team that we operate on a hub and spoke model, meaning we work with a core team of providers, and then we have a couple dozen satellite employees that are remote, freelance, contract, or otherwise that we utilize per project. It's been a lot of fun. My business partner, Ben Warner, and I have been in business separately for the better part of 3 decades. Um, and we hope that you find this information useful and um, have some great questions afterwards. So I'll get into it. Talk today is going to be focused on maximizing your content. And that's something that gets thrown around a lot. Maximizing, being efficient, being clever. But what does that really mean? I'm going to break it down into a couple different areas. I'm going to start with content, focus, and strategy, shaping content budgets and where to put your money, how to make sure your content is being used to its fullest potential. And that means shooting for each platform, formatting, and the use cases that differ between each platform. Um, Also, making sure your internal team and your network is being utilized well. Keeping your team focused and not chasing every rabbit down every rabbit hole. And then the lifestyle targeting process and breaching into new areas and what growth really looks like. So let's get into this. I'm going to start with first of all is content, focus, and strategy. Um, there are plenty of analogies and metaphors. I may make some bad ones through this talk, which I'm known for. Um, but without being cliche, this is the most important area to get right when starting the content production journey, either as a brand or for a campaign specifically. So your aim is only as good as your data is not just a vague platitude, but it really is the guiding light for starting content, meaning that your analytics team, your data research, your market research going into a campaign or a brand launch should guide everything you do and be informed by the lifestyles that your customers aspire to obtain. And your job is to take those aspirations, take those goals, and then position your brand in between um, those aspirations and where your customers currently are. Um, in the outdoor space, that's sitting at a desk less is not a hard sell for anybody or any campaign, but it's a important thing to focus on in the start because it allows your brand to bring in people that have already achieved those goals and use them as selling points, as the guiding light to guide your customers, your potential customers, your fans out to where they want to be. Outlining your product and services in a calendar format is the important second step after your initial focus and referencing your data to make sure that your content matches up with sales cycles, points of interest, and enthusiasm on the calendar, and referencing the data on sales cycles and preparing your content, your brand focus, your campaign to highlight those areas. The third point within your content focus and strategy is probably the most difficult. We all have inboxes full of requests for sponsorships, events, new ambassadors, brand collabs. And what we've learned over several decades of doing this is the ability to say no will really make or break the success of your brand throughout the year. There are way too many opportunities for new brands, new ambassadors, events that constantly hang that carrot out in front of a marketing team saying that if we just do this, we can reach a new goal, reach a new customer set. What that does is it detracts from your original goal, most likely. It spreads a marketing team and a budget much thinner. And a lot of time it's heading into unknown territories that are perhaps not as researched and are not as important to the brand overall. The last point in content focus and strategies is keeping it simple. I've seen way too many campaigns, way too many brands that try to satisfy everybody, that try to be appealing to everybody, that try to be interesting to a really broad set. And that's not to say that we don't want to invite everybody into a brand and everybody into a campaign. But being focused on the story itself and telling a story honestly and clearly is very important, mostly because none of us are operating with multi-million-dollar budgets to tell these simple stories unless we're large Fortune 500 companies or clients. But even then, a simple story is much easier to digest. Next is shaping content budgets and where to put your money. This is a tough one. On the outset of a marketing budget, the primary role of a director should be allocating the budget, planning out against the sales cycle, against the marketing calendar, how much money is going to go towards each campaign. What typically happens is that we've seen, and this is only in our experience, other people may have a differing experience slightly. Choosing ambassadors, content creators, producers that have a large audience or a high level of popularity early may be appealing because they already have an audience. They already have a certain level of notoriety. But what you're really after is the content. And you're after the unique story told efficiently for as little as possible, really. So finding an ambassador that is able to do that might not always be the ambassador or the producer that has the deepest resume or the largest audience already available. There are some fantastic people that come into the content creation space, which is obviously crowded, that have access to the same equipment, extremely high levels of talent, and are willing to work with smaller budgets, smaller production crews to tell a grittier version of a story without all the bells and whistles that might get you where you need to be with regard to high versus low production and the final product that you're seeking. So with regard to budget, that can end up saving you a lot of money. The flip side of the coin is it also can cost you a lot of money. So doing your due diligence on the front end and making sure that those people have the skill and the creative talent to pull it off is obviously primarily the first goal, but secondarily, making sure that those people have an interest in what you're doing and a hunger will get you a lot further than a polished portfolio and a large audience. And going back to our first point in the content focus, working with smaller, more nimble teams can also help you to tell a simpler story that's much more clear. Third point today is how to make sure your content is being used to its fullest potential. There are an endless amount of new platforms, apps, social platforms, and giant engines that are hungry for more content. Again, I would say the same thing. Staying focused is ultra important. There are plenty of planning softwares and platforms that help with this process. Sprout, Planoly, um, HubSpot, Preview, Later. Those are all apps that will help you determine your creative layout and a flow that represents the brand. Remember, customers or fans are not only engaging with your content individually, but they're encountering your brand at the account level. So how everything flows together at the top level creatively as a single body of work is just as representative of who you are and the campaign and the message you're trying to get across as the individual content piece as well. So holding all of your content and your brand in that context is very important as well. Excuse me. With all the platforms and apps available, shooting horizontally and vertically is a trick. There are tons of methods that people that are much more talented than I in content production can go over, shooting with multiple cameras, multiple lenses, multiple angles. But being aware of where your content is going to land, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, your website, TikTok, and all the other emerging media platforms all have different use cases, different formats, different crop angles, different lengths of time that typical pieces of content are engaged with, and all of those being in consideration are important. The apps most of the time have different degrees of analytics in the back end. Not all of them are the same, but they do give a rough estimate of how your fans and customers are engaging with your content. Use that information to figure out how long, where to place points of interest within your content, and how to edit each piece. It does put the burden of editing on the production team a little bit more to create multiple formats of the same pieces of content, but through that optimization, you will have ammunition that is able to be efficiently used on each app, each platform, with much better result. Again, maximizing your budget and keeping your story very simple and very focused. The next point is making sure your internal team is being utilized. Our friends are always the best connection first go to. In fact, they're probably leading similar lifestyles than our clients, and that our clients and our own brands are focused on primarily. So they're going to have great experience to pull into the brand. They're also going to have a vested interest, hopefully, with you as friends and you in connected networks towards your mutual success. So close contacts, the people in the building, your first ring of connection are going to be valuable to tell your story comparatively to a stranger, somebody not familiar with you, not familiar with your preferences, your style, or the brand itself. And some of those people are going to be sitting within your own organization, maybe not on the creative team, maybe not in marketing or on the brand team, but likely they are out using your products and services. They're familiar with the brand, they're familiar with the goals of each campaign, and you can find some surprising resources. So creating an environment where the team comes together, discusses what the larger goals are, and trying to shape the branches of your own tree first will save money, speed up the production process, provide new perspectives of people that are close to the brand, but might not always be sitting at the table with their own voice. So you might end up being surprised at what can come out of that. The next point, the fifth in our talk is keeping your team focused on what matters most. Chasing trends is an ultra enticing temptation. Now, I wouldn't say goal. Going viral as a pitch, if I hear that coming up in the pitch process, anybody who's in the agency world or in the marketing world and gets a request that they would like a piece of content to go viral, at the outset knows exactly what I'm talking about. Um, that typically is chasing flash in the pan moments that are probably not close to the brand. And what it does is dilute your focus, dilute your budget, detracts from your original goals, most likely, and is very far from a sure bet. If you were to sit down with a famous musician and ask them which song they thought was going to become a large hit, a huge hit before they released it, most would, I would guess, would say they'd had no idea which were going to work. And conversely, I'm sure that they recorded plenty they thought were going to be uh, critical smashes that ended up failing miserably. So staying true to your brand, going through what we've already covered, being simple, being smart, staying on track with who you are, keeping your friends close, ups the odds, the percentage opportunity that you will have a piece of content or a campaign that becomes wildly successful, perhaps even beyond what you planned it on being. But at the end of the day, it will keep you true to what you are, to what your brand is, and where you're headed. When you're chasing a trend, I like to say, sorry for the bad analogy, but you're leaving your own party for somebody else's. I would encourage everybody to throw your own party and say no to marketing FOMO. Going back to saying no and not sponsoring other people's work, but really telling your own stories. The fear of missing out is powerful in human psychology, and we think if we're not going to be part of that next great opportunity, that we're just going to miss out. And what that does is it sends your fans, your potential customers, off chasing that trend rather than you telling your own story and keeping them in your own camp. So really push back against that FOMO and throw your own party, create your own enthusiasm, your own energy that you can lean on, and resist the temptation to leech off of what other people are doing, and stay focused on what you set out to do in the first place, and stick to the brand identity. If your website, your email, your social media are all completely in sync and flowing efficiently, branching out to new opportunities without chasing those trends, and while saying no to FOMO, becomes less risky. It allows you to venture off in new areas slowly and incrementally. And the last point is right in line with that. Lifestyle targeting and breaching new areas and expanding without chasing those trends is a delicate balance, and it requires a lot of experience, a lot of data research backing up on the new areas that a brand and a campaign would push into. Performing those customer profiles, utilizing research groups, test groups is fantastic, but it should be done one incremental step at a time. Jumping into the next room without warning, without any support, and without a gradual change is not only pretty unlikely to be successful, it's risky from a budgetary perspective because you're going to be jumping into an audience that isn't familiar with what you're doing, or potentially could alienate your current user group and fan base as well if they find that it's distasteful or it is not a lifestyle that they aspire to achieve. So you could divide yourself and conquer from within that way. Searching for competitive uses and brands that solve problems and perform functions that your product could, but aren't necessarily inside your industry, is a good way to do that. You might find that another industry is using a similar product to great effect, but it's not something you looked at. Again, that'll be guided by data. and leaning on your analytics team through each of these points is going to be really important. Uh, that's that's the gist of what I had for you today. Supposed to keep this to about 20 minutes. I'm going to leave contact info in the bottom of this video if you want to get in touch with Skeleton Key. Thanks everybody for watching, and hope you learned something about how to use your content more effectively.